Welcome back. We're going to continue with today's, what we have in our agenda for today. And next we're going to have Chester Hansen, and who's the Traffic Standards Manager. He's going to talk to us about the updates to Chapter 7 on the PPM, the median traffic railings, overhead signs, and FAA notifications. Chester?
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to talk to you this afternoon about three of the changes that we made into the Plans Preparation Manual for 2013. Most of the changes that we made are in Chapter 7, which is a section on traffic and ITS design. One of the things that we did this year was reformat Chapter 7. 7.2 used to be signing and pavement marking, and that section had gotten to be pretty long, and it was all mixed up with signing issues and pavement marking issues. And as we added to it, pavement marking and so forth, they were all intermixed. They weren't in consecutive order. So we decided to break out the pavement marking from the signing. So now what you'll find in the PPM is 7.2 is strictly for signing, and we moved all the issues of pavement markings down into 7.6. 7.6 used to be foundation design, so we moved foundation design down into section 7.7. So there are some format changes in Chapter 7. Hopefully it'll make it a lot easier for us to find what you're looking for. One of the other changes that we made was in the section on median traffic railings. We modified this section to include information that was in Design Bulletin 1205 and Design Bulletin 1211 that were issued last year. If you can remember, Design Bulletin 1205 provided guidance for the design of median traffic railing signs until such time that structures had time to complete Index 11871. In July of 2012, the Design Bulletin 1211 came out, which released the design index for 11871, which did address median traffic railings. Index 11871 is unique in that it's the only single column sign support which is not a breakaway design. A major concern we had for median traffic railing signs was that if an errant vehicle rode up on the barrier wall and hit the sign, that it might be projected into traffic coming from the opposite direction. For this reason, the sign support was not designed to break away when impacted. The department made the conscious decision that the installation of critical signs was more important than the risk involved with an errant vehicle impacting the sign support. This is why you see the restrictions on its use for signs considered critical to safety. We've identified specific signs in the PPM which we consider critical to safety. If you read in the PPM right now, there are 4 signs, or really 5 signs. The R3-4 with the official use only FTP sign. The W9-1, which is the next 3 are actually merge signs that occur on the inside lane. The W9-1L, the 92R, and the W4-2. We did try for a long time to consider if there was some other signs that were critical to safety that should be included, but this was the ones we decided to put in there. We have identified these signs as being critical, but if you have any other permanent signs that you consider critical to safety, we'd ask that you could, send them up to the central office for concurrence. In this way, we can add signs to the PPM that we see being used that are critical to safety. But 1171 should be used only for permanent signs that are considered critical to safety. We don't want to put these signs out there if they're not absolutely needed. 11871 can also be used for temporary work zone signs. They're to be used only when there's no other alternative than on the median than installing the sign on the barrier wall. You can also see there are some restrictions in here on using 11871, which is a bridge traffic railing index, using 11871 in lieu of 870. The only time 871 can be used on a bridge railing in lieu of 870 is on the inside railing where there's insufficient room for the 11870 offset. Another change that we made in the PPM dealt with overhead signs on freeways. This came from a task team from the upper management. They wanted us to look at these things for two reasons. One of the reasons is that they felt like that a lot of the arms were getting excessively long, and they considered that the cost of those structures was getting out of control, and they wanted us to look at it from the cost standpoint. They also wanted to do it for consistency reasons. They wanted each one of the districts doing it in the same manner. If you're familiar with the MUTCD, there is a section in there in section 2A17 of the MUTCD that lists 13 conditions that should be evaluated to determine when the optional use of overhead signs have value on freeways and expressways. We had a task team that looked and provided recommendation. It consisted of people from the structures office, traffic operations people from the district, people in central office from design and from traffic ops. And we actually looked at what the districts were doing. We asked each district what was their policy on overhead guide signs that were not mandatory in the MUTCD to try to figure out, what might be the best solution. We issued a design bulletin, Bulletin 12-17 in 2012, that took the conclusions from that task team and made recommendations of when we were to use overhead cantilever signs. Now, the overhead cantilever signs are divided into two different types of signs. They're exit direction signs and advanced guide signs. This slide shows, a picture here shows an example of an exit guide sign. It is the sign that's placed at the goer of the exit on freeways and expressways. This is the policy that we have in the PPM for exit guide sign. I think that if you look at this, most of it is pretty consistent with what districts have been doing. If you've got interchange spacings of less than or equal to 3 miles, the exit guide sign, you should have an overhead sign for all of the exit signs. If you have a left exit on the freeway, again, you should be using an overhead sign. The next one probably had more discussion with this last item, number 3, than any of the other ones that we had. For 3 or more lanes, we started out with, we wanted to have, if it was 3 or more lanes, through lanes, that you would always have an exit direction sign. There was some discussion that there are a lot of places that we have 6 lanes that's still rural, and it was felt like that there was really no need to put an overhead sign if that area was rural. So kind of agreement between all concerned as to a balance was that we said when it's determined by the district design engineer to be appropriate. So we left put that in just on the 3rd item here for 3 lanes or more exits. It kind of leaves it up to the district design engineers to what they want to do. The next section addresses the advanced guide signs. When we're talking about advanced guide signs, we're talking about those signs that are 1/2 mile to 1 mile in advance of the exit ramp. And the photograph shows you an example of a 1 mile advanced guide sign. For advanced guide signs, PPM, this is the guidance that's in the PPM for when you can use an overhead cantilever sign. Again, it's interchange spacings less than or equal to 3 miles, left exits on freeways, and on all freeway to freeway ramps. Now, we've got on freeway to freeway ramps, the MUTCD calls for 1/2 mile, 1 mile, and 2 mile advanced guide signs. Right now, the MUTCD already requires the 1 mile to be a mandatory requirement. And PPM is making also the 1.5 mile and the 2 mile to be a mandatory requirement. Now, any advanced guide signs or exit guide signs that do not follow these guidelines are to be ground-mounted signs. Now, it does say in the PPM that if you have slope restrictions and limited right-of-way or site restrictions, you do not have to meet these requirements. So if you've got restricted right-of-way and site restrictions, you can use overhead guide signs wherever they're needed in that application. Another thing that we addressed in the overhead guide signs was the length of the arm. Although a lot of districts want to put the guide signs over the lane, Structures was concerned about the vulnerability of cantilever signs, especially under hurricane conditions when you have these long arms. So the MUTCD does not require advanced guide signs or over the roadway. In fact, they suggest that they can be over the shoulder. So the PPM now is saying that the advanced guide signs shall be placed over the shoulder with the edge of the sign aligned with the edge of the travel way. Now the left picture kind of shows an example of how we would like these signs mounted. You can see that the left edge of the sign is even with the left edge of the roadway. Now for exit signs, the exit sign should be placed over the travel way. The left edge of the sign should extend far enough to cover the left edge of the exit ramp. In fact, if you were to look at these longitudinally along the roadway, you can see that the exit signs really all line up with the edge of the throughway throughout the whole advanced exit. The last thing I'd like to talk about is in Chapter 13. We've gotten a lot of comments from districts that deal with airspace high mast signs or any other kind of signs that extend into FAA airspace. A lot of the complaints were that it's a responsibility of the engineer of record to determine and to coordinate those intrusions into the airspace. Most of the people were going out to the website and just putting the location of the signs and the height out there and let the website or that the FAA determine whether they need to file a notification. What we were finding was that when they did that, there were a lot of concerns, or they were getting a lot of comments from the website with more information. And it was more than just the requirements that we have in the PPM as to when we need to file a notification. So we made a change in 13.5 of PPM to when you have signs that you think intrude into the airspace, FAA airspace, that you would contact the Central Aviation Office here in Tallahassee. They have a person that his sole responsibility is to determine when we have signs that extend into the FAA airspace. He said that they have plenty of opportunity to look at the signs and determine beforehand whether those signs really apply. So if you're working on high mast lights and other things that you think might extend into the airspace restrictions, call the FDOT Central Office. They have a person that, and talk to the person that deals with airspace restrictions, and he will actually take the location and heights of these signs and determine whether the engineer of record has to file an FAA notification. So this should simplify it and cut down on the number of hours that consultants or people are spending trying to figure out whether they actually need to comply with the notification. That's all I have for this afternoon. So if you've got any questions concerning the median traffic railings or guide signs, or FAA airspace restrictions, we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Chester, the only question that we have at this time is, can we get the contact information for the FTT Aviation?
Yes, I think I think we have it in the PPM. I don't list it here, but if you look in the PPM, we did have the site location of what the email address is for that person in the central office.